Welcome in, everybody, to the Blogger Bowl Week 1 preview college football. We are 12 hours away from kicking off our first full college football slate of the season, or 24 hours away, excuse me, math, not my strong suit.
Just
24
technically, we did
hours
that
away.
last night.
Midnight would have been awesome. That would have been fantastic. We are 24 hours away from kicking off our first full slate of the college football season. Best time of the year is upon us. I'm Dan, joined by Matt and Florida Phil. Florida Phil, the corporate overlords, have given him a window to join us, and we are super thrilled to have him with us today. Guys, how we doing?
Shouldn't it be Florida State in parentheses, Phil?
Yeah, well, I'm just encompassing the whole state right now, but obviously after the Graham Mertz performance last night, you know where my allegiance lies, and I've always had my Knowles.
I was gonna wear the Florida State shirt or the LSU shirt just because it's an awesome shirt, and then I realized it would come off as trolling, and then I was super okay with it.
That's okay.
It's fine. We started the season last night. We started week 1 last night with some pretty interesting games that, while the level of football might not have been great across the board, there was definitely some interesting stuff that happened in these games last night. We'll start with what was probably the most anticipated game of Thursday night: Utah 24, Florida 11. Florida had a sequence where they got a false start on 4th and inches, missed a 30-yard field goal, got a stop on defense, but had 2 players with the same number on the field on the punt, which gave Utah a first down, and then Utah scored a touchdown. That's a 10 to 14 point swing in a game they lost by 13. I don't like making sweeping statements about week 1, but Florida does look like a mess. The offensive line is a problem. They had 21 carries for 13 yards and gave up 5 sacks. Graham Mertz is still Graham Mertz. But I think the bigger thing was the undisciplined mental mistakes they made constantly throughout the game. I can live with the slow roll of trying to build up a roster and not going to the transfer portal and trying to turn things over in year 1. If Florida really wants to build this thing organically, that's fine. But you also can't beat yourself as badly as they did last night. I talked about Utah yesterday as the Death Star that takes some time to build up to full functionality, and that's what it looked like to me. Their defense was great. But and they got enough out of Bryson Barnes and Nate Johnson, but they need a healthy Cam Rising. Had a negative EPA per rush and 27% rushing success rate. We know so much of what they do is tied to their ability to run the football. And with Barnes, they really weren't able to run the ball, and Johnson's pretty raw as a passer. So like the whole, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks thing might be a little dated in this world. And it kind of seems like they have the 2 quarterbacks to do that, but they need Cam Rising to kind of meld that together. I'm fascinated to see what the number next week against Baylor on the road looks like, what that number is going to open up at. Phil, what did you take away from the Utah-Florida game?
Well, I think my biggest thing is it's just so easy for Billy Napier to blame their special teams coordinator. Do you guys know who their special teams coordinator is?
They don't have one.
They don't have
somebody.
one.
I was going to say somebody from Holy Cross.
No. Which is like, if you go into a game without a special teams coordinator and then special teams are an absolute disaster.
Yeah, that's a tough look.
That's a really tough look, and that comes from the head coach. And it's honestly, it was a little reminiscent of some of the special teams disaster.
I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second because they don't have a special teams coordinator. What they do have, they have Chris Couch, who is the game changer coordinator, and his role is primarily to work with the special teams unit. And they did change the game for Florida last night.
I was about to say, he lived up to his title.
Sorry to interrupt.
They changed the game just like Tim Anderson.
I forgot about the game changer coordinator until you brought up their special teams coaching situation. So go ahead. Sorry, Phil. Sorry to interrupt.
Well, I just, it's hilarious. It's a game-changing coordinator. And it was reminiscent of, and a lot of times in week 1, like that's the thing that you have to not mess up. Like, let's just not make special teams something that is completely screwed up. Reminiscent of last year's Florida State LSU game with Polian, fumbling the bag on that one. So anyway, yeah, that was my big takeaway is you can't have awful special teams week 1 in a close game what would have been a close game on the road. It's just unacceptable.
Last year, Florida was a team. It was a very flawed team, but it was the first year of a new head coach, and they had an elite, talented quarterback who covered up a lot of warts at times. They didn't look like a team that was in year 2 now. Like the same mistakes that you're expecting to start to get cleaned up in year 2 are still popping up in game 1 of year 2. And I know going to Utah is a tough place to play, but team without their starting quarterback, you're in year 2 of your new system. Those things have to be cleaned up. You can't go and run for 13 yards on 21 carries. I know sacks count against the rushing yards, but still, 5 sacks. And you take them out, Trevor Etienne. Trevor, see, I said it right this time. Trevor Etienne, 7 carries, 25 yards. Like, that's not good enough. Also,
And he's a good back.
In a tight game like that, Trevor Etienne probably needs more than 7 carries, or you need to get creative in ways to get him the football. And Graham Mertz throwing, 44 times? I know they were chasing, but like, that's not a recipe for this team to do what they want to do. So I don't know. It was a very troubling sign if you're looking for progression and culture building in year 2 of the Billy Napier regime. Now he's got a great recruiting class coming in, so like I think he's probably fairly safe because they're going to want to hold on to that one. But in terms of on-field product, not great.
Yeah, it's honestly like it's shockingly bad, right? You don't want to just throw like sweeping generalities on it, but you're Florida.
But that was bad.
You have every resource at your disposal. Like I've seen some of the Florida like facilities. They're like, it's just bad. Like you're Florida. It's you just can't be that. You can't start a season like this in year 2 of a regime. It's just a bad look. Hopefully it doesn't have, for them, not for me. Hopefully it doesn't have any implications on the recruiting trail. But seasons that get derailed, especially now they're going to play SEC schools, like look out.
That's tough.
So my last another just statistical thing from this game: Florida 1 for 13 on third down. Obviously that's not
good.
My last thought on this before we move on is I was thinking about this just a little while ago. I am so excited for like Graham Mertz to get like a 6th or 7th round pick and end up on somebody's roster and like on like NFL Live or NFL Network during preseason next year to be like, whatever team drafts him, they're really excited what they've seen in camp so far from Graham Mertz, and all of college football Twitter to be the naked gun forehead slap gif. Like that's what it's going to be.
Yeah.
Wait for that. The other big game last night, the Big Ten opener, the Matt Rule era begins for Nebraska with a heartbreaking 13-10 loss to the Minnesota Golden Gophers. I think there were 2 scenarios where you could be upset if you're a Nebraska fan: a complete no-show or what ended up happening last night. They were 5-22 in one-score games under Scott Frost. They were 2-14 in one-score games since the start of 2021. Rule talked a big game about how they had to be better in the fourth quarter, and they completely melted down. I made a joke to some friends last night that betting Nebraska to turn the ball over on their last possession was a good bet if you could get it. And sure enough, they did. They turned the ball over 4 times. Jeff Sims, 3 interceptions, threw a pick in the end zone. It was just a mess for Nebraska offensively most of the night. However, I will say, if we want to be positive, very impressed by the 3-3-5 defense they ran last night. The scheme versatility gave Minnesota problems all night. Tony White, the defensive coordinator, he learned this defense from Rocky Long, who kind of pioneered it. They might have something to work with there. Minnesota, they had a negative EPA per rush, 24% success rate running the ball. We know how much running the ball matters for Minnesota. Ethan Kaliakmanis, the Greek rifle, might be my new favorite player in college football. He throws the ball as hard as he can every single throw, even if he's not supposed to.
Such a college quarterback.
It might go to the other team, but I'm on the Greek rifle bandwagon. He's not good yet, but it's fun to watch. Matt, what did you take away from what you saw last night in Minnesota?
Like, if you're Minnesota, you can't really feel good about that effort last night. I know you came away with a win, but like, I mean, man, that's
one.
You got to win, and you're 1-0, and I know it's hard to win football games and all that, but like, you kind of feel dirty about that one. It's one you really didn't deserve to win. You probably shouldn't have gotten it, and it's not a very good sign for them going forward. They couldn't run the football at all whatsoever. I think it was 55 yards on 25 carries, if I'm not mistaken. You just had the box score open. Couldn't really run the football. Kaliakmanis, like you said, looks very, very raw and is going to take some time to develop. So I'm not sure what they do going forward offensively, because there's going to be a lot of time to find themselves an identity. And Nebraska, like, I just felt bad for Matt Rule. Like that was on the verge of being such a feel-good story. Like, it came in Nebraska, we got an upset win. Phil's boy Jeff Sims was going to go on the road and have himself a nice game and come away with a win, and then it just didn't happen.
Yeah, for me, it doesn't feel like this is like end of the road, dark times for Matt Rule.
I agree with that.
Matter. Like, this is
it's
not
a punch in the gut, but like, it's not.
It was great until the last 5 minutes.
Yeah. And like the team, it's not like they played like wildly undisciplined. Like, they made mistakes, but ultimately they played really sound defense. I mean, the touchdown catch late by, I think it was Daniel Jackson from Minnesota, was just an elite catch.
Catch of the year candidate in week 1. Like, that was awesome.
I mean, the route was incredible. The toe tap was awesome. And it's just funny because it's like, man, that probably was a lot of scoring in games. Guys are making catches like that. But this was just quintessential, like almost November Big Ten football in August, which is pretty awesome. But again, troubling start for PJ Fleck and the Gophers, just because they looked pretty blah. And with their schedule, they're pretty blah is not going to be going to get them very far.
It's not going to get them to a bowl game.
No, but for Nebraska, it's a shit way to start the season. But I love Matt Rule as a college coach. You'll see some growth in it. I think there'll be some personal like accountability. It's going to be very different than Scott Frost, which I'm excited to see because when Northwestern, shout out Ireland last year. But when Nebraska is good, it's good for college football, and I hope that this is a bump in the road to an otherwise like solid season, right?
Yeah, like I almost felt better if I was a Nebraska fan after last night than I would as a Minnesota fan, even though Nebraska didn't come away with the win.
It's an interesting point. I will say to 2 points. One, you say you're not sure where Minnesota goes on offense. The good news for them, they have a couple of games where they can get right. They play Eastern Michigan next, and then they play North Carolina, who can make any offense look good. So
that's a good point.
We'll see what happens there. Secondly, I get where you're coming from, where when you say Nebraska, college football is better when Nebraska is good. College football is pretty great when Nebraska is playing and losing one-score games every week, because I feel bad for Nebraska fans, but this is tremendous content.
It's almost, see, for me, I think throughout last year, it was great content. And then I was like, I'm ready to turn the page, because last year I started with the mentality, like, I'm ready to turn the page. They statistically can't get this unlucky again.
Yeah.
And you realize it was just poor execution late. And so this year I'd opened the book back up, turned the page, and it happens again. I'm like, I don't want to keep watching this story again. But now if it becomes even more of a bit, if it happens 2 more times, then I'm back in.
Last year was almost more funny too, because it was Scott Frost, and Scott Frost was just such kind of like, he was just kind of arrogant with no reason to be arrogant, because he'd never done anything outside of taking over a UCF program and having one really good year. But he just had this arrogance about him, and it was kind of funny to see him get knocked down. Whereas Matt Rule just seems like a good guy and like a good college football coach and somebody you want leading your college football program. So for him, it's more like, I feel bad for him. Whereas Scott Frost, it was like, this is hilarious.
Yeah.
The only other game last night with any real kind of implications, NC State 24, UConn 14. I cannot, guys, with Dave Doran anymore. I'm over it. Attempted a 50-yard field goal on 4th and 4 from the UConn 32. They had conservative and bad play calling all night with a really good OC and a really good quarterback. But the bigger issue, while I would caution anyone not to overreact to week 1, I will say that a lot between now and our shows next week, UConn had 6.2 yards per carry and a 0.31 EPA per rush, which is a 90th percentile EPA per rush. That seems a bit foreboding for the Wolfpack with a visit from Notre Dame coming up.
I was going to say that's not a great sign with Notre Dame coming to town in a couple weeks for them, because that's an advantage that they're probably going to be able to take advantage of. I'm just happy I live bet NC State minus 8.5 when UConn went up 7-0. I was really happy I hopped on that live line. That was a good awareness by me.
Yeah, I think thought NC State's defense was going to not look like this. And also the first drive for NC State, I'm like, man, they are moving. This is fast. But often you can get blinders on, which is like one of the opening series, or the first 2 opening series where they're on script. Things look good. The kind of classic Tommy Reese from every Notre Dame season that he ever had, where the opening script would be perfect and then it would just go into a shell.
Roll Tide.
The thing that's concerning for NC State, I think Brandon Armstrong looked good, looked athletic, but anything downfield did not look very accurate by any stretch of the matter. So curious if that's just getting timing with his new wide receivers. But next week will be obviously a massive test for their defense, for their rush defense. And as a Notre Dame fan and writer, I liked seeing that because this is definitely an early game that the pros is a challenge, right? And I think it'll be interesting to see how they are with their home stadium coming off a win. It's a huge early game test for them. But ultimately, coming away from this, I was not expecting to be dazzled by Robert and Brandon Armstrong's reunion, but I was expecting a little bit more. So for me, it's looking at where can they go from here. And a big theme I'm going to get into later are some of these quarterbacks, were there one great season, was that who they are? Or are there 4 seasons and average play who they are? And so there's going to be a lot of that throughout the ACC, throughout different kind of scopes of college football. And that's one of the more interesting storylines of, did guys catch lightning in a bottle for one season, or are they just average?
It's almost just like Dan, you said that you can't do it with Dave Doran anymore. It's just, there's always going to kind of be a ceiling as to what they're going to do and almost what they're going to like try to do. He's just content with being a very boring, conservative, vanilla head coach, and that's only going to get that program so far. It's not bad for NC State because that's going to get a program like that 8 wins a year, 7 wins a year, and they'll be bowl eligible. But like, there's just always going to be a ceiling there.
Yeah, and they've won 20 games in the last 2 years. This has been a good program, but it's it's almost, if I was an NC State fan, I'd be frustrated because you're almost like close to being really good forever.
Yeah, but you've never been really good, and that's kind of the interesting spot where they are. My last thought on this: good teams win, great teams cover. UConn remains frisky. I just kind of looking at their schedule. UMass to close the season. There's an outside chance that game could be for bowl eligibility for both teams, which would be fun. Obviously we need to see more than just New Mexico State for UMass, but that would be like a dream scenario, is UConn and UMass, for as much shit as people have talked about those teams.
Is that at UConn?
It's in Amherst. It's in UMass.
Okay. I was going to say, if that's at UConn, you have to go, but that's a little
no. I also think that no, it's the Saturday after Thanksgiving, so we'll see what happens. All right, we're going to move on. We're going to turn the page to tomorrow, and we will start, guys, with, if you watch a lot of Fox Sports, the biggest game in the history of college football. Tomorrow, there has never been a bigger college football game than Colorado at number 17 TCU. Never before have we seen such a titanic clash between a team that is a 20.5-point underdog as the Colorado Buffaloes on the road at TCU, the total 63.5. I will set the stage for you here because I want to, obviously this is kind of we want to talk about each team individually. I think Colorado lost games by an average margin of 29.1 points per game last year, the worst in the country, and the 4th worst among Power 5 programs in the past 30 years. Deion Sanders comes in. He brings in 86 new players, 9 of which came from Jackson State, including Shador Sanders and Travis Hunter. Only 10 scholarship players from last year's team remain. Colorado's 53 incoming transfers has only roughly 24 since the end of spring practice. This is a complete overhaul of a roster for Colorado. Deion created more controversy this week in a piece with ESPN where he said he doesn't like the word culture. He doesn't really understand what it means when it comes to culture. He says teammates don't have to necessarily like each other. He's been on teams where the quarterback and the wide receiver didn't get along very well, but when it came time to play the game, they were on the same page, which the Deion Sanders experience is going to be a Rorschach test all season. The people who want to see positive are going to see positive. The people who want to see negative are going to see negative. What constitutes success for Colorado, short of winning this game, for you guys tomorrow?
I think for me, an interesting matchup is that they have 2 of the top flight corners. And so I'm curious to see what teams do to combat that, because I think with Deion's style, you're just going to see like, hey, let's man up their best wide receivers on the outside. But I'm going into it without trying to have any too hot of takes before I see them play. And I'm not saying this in the fact that I think they're going to be good, but it's mostly just out of curiosity. Like, I'm so interested to see what a brand new team from all facets.
Phil, are you getting a call? I just lost his audio.
Yeah, I lost his. I could see him. I'll go.
We'll try to figure out what's happening with Florida's.
Yeah, Phil, you figure it out. I'll take it from here. For me, they can't get bullied on either side of the ball in the trenches, because they obviously brought in their playmakers, and they brought in obviously Shador Sanders came with, Travis Hunter came with. They have Cormani McLean. Like, they're gonna have playmakers on the outsides, but they didn't do a ton to address interior offensive line, defensive line play. And like Phil said, I think on defense, they're going to be a little bit cocky and just say Hunter and McLean are going to man up whoever they're going up against. That's all well and good, but they're going to have to be able to stop the run and play, in between the hash marks. I'm not sure they're going to be able to do that. And you can be as talented as you want on the outside, but if you're getting bullied, that's when attrition starts to set in on the inside. And it's a team that doesn't seem like they're going to handle that adversity all that well, at least early on with the high expectations and just Deion's personality. They gotta show me something playing the run and running the football.
Yeah, as far as TCU is concerned, Chandler Morris got hurt last year versus Colorado. He won the job, so the ceiling might be higher at quarterback. I mean, obviously, you had a Heisman Trophy finalist last year, so it's tough, but the talent level is very high with Chandler Morris. They lost a lot of guys, but they bring in transfers. John Paul Richardson, JoJo Earl, Trey Sanders is in from Alabama to help their run game. The back seven on defense could be pretty good, even though they lost D. Winters and Hodges Tomlinson. So this TCU team is a very talented group. They do kind of try to redo this, run it back with some transfers coming in. But like you said, this is a really, really tough challenge when, yes, TCU runs that 3-3-5 defense, but we saw that defense can be very physical. That defense can, particularly at the line of scrimmage, can cause problems. And so for TCU, they didn't play particularly well against Colorado over the balance of the game last year and then kind of pulled away late. I think for them, they're going to want to get off to a better start. And I think your point about what Colorado has up front is going to be the issue. There's going to be a pretty big jump in the talent that you're facing for Shedeur Sanders and all of these players that came from the FCS level. Because, yes, he's been coached by Deion Sanders, but I'm kind of an iron sharpens iron kind of guy, and I don't know.
Nothing can replicate game speed at this level.
At this level, like Travis Hunter's not going up against a lot of NFL caliber wide receivers at Jackson State, where he will be at this level. And maybe, like, we don't really know how far he is in his development. Yes, being coached by Deion Sanders is always going to be a good thing for a young defensive back, but we don't know what his developmental level is like when we do that. Maybe it's not a problem. Maybe just the talent is so good that he's just going to be a superstar. And it wouldn't surprise me even a little bit, but just something I'm kind of curious about.
What I'm curious about is my audio.
Back. Phil's back.
Good. Phil's back.
Welcome back, Phil. Florida Phil's back in the house.
So what I'm curious about is how TCU is going to match up against Travis Hunter. I think what they're hopefully going to do is put someone over the top and force Sanders to have maneuver in the pocket, because the offensive line is not going to be very good. So, you hope, at least from my standpoint, if I'm TCU, I start off the game pretty conservative from a secondary standpoint and make sure you have help over the top, because again, they can get out-athleted,
right? Sure.
By Travis Hunter and Sanders, because they could get beat on a one-on-one, they could get beat for a 70-yard touchdown. That's the types of athletes that they are. So if I'm them, I start the game off conservatively from a secondary standpoint and hope that you can really
make Colorado go 80 yards down the field on you.
Exactly. And see if they can actually do that. I don't think that Colorado will have the patience for that. I think they're going to try to have some flashy plays, which we'll see how that works out. But this is a game, regardless of how you feel about Colorado, is just interesting because nothing like this has ever been done before in college football. And so that's really why I'm excited. Not that I think that Colorado is going to be great. Not that I think they're going to be terrible. I think they're going to be just an average team that would be super boring to watch. And if it wasn't all of these crazy situations. So that's why I'm going to tune in. And that's why it's going to be probably one of the higher watch games of the weekend.
I feel like Colorado is going to be like the Angels, where it's going to be like, you're going to see on Twitter, like, Shedeur Sanders, sick rollout, finds Travis Hunter, one-handed touchdown grab, amazing. Final score, TCU 63, Colorado 21, like stuff like that all year. Like, it's going to be highlights of how awesome they are, and then the final is like, they got blown out.
Yes. Here, I'm going to set a prop for you, a head-to-head prop. More number one top plays on SportsCenter's top plays for Colorado, or wins?
Oh, number one top plays.
Yeah, easily.
They're gonna find one like
in fact,
every other
let me back up. Okay, just more SportsCenter top plays or wins minus.
Now we got an equation in here.
Minus 2.5 top plays. So I'm not going to give it straight up.
I'll still take the top plays. I don't think there were many football games this year.
Also, the amount of like who's defending this, and it's going to be like Sanders and Hunter, or like who's completing a pass on this. It's McLean and Hunter, and it's like, the problem is there's other guys.
Well, there were like 10 other plays on the drive that all worked, and then TCU scored a touchdown.
All right. The other game fun. I think is probably the marquee game on Saturday.
Notre Dame, Tennessee State.
Holy cross, Merrimack.
Enjoy coming down. Enjoy joining the rest of us commoners and playing FCS opponents, guys. Enjoy that one. Texas hasn't played one in a really long time. It was Sam Houston State in 2006. Anyway, North Carolina and South Carolina playing in Charlotte. North Carolina, 2.5-point favorite. South Carolina, 64.5. South Carolina ended the season throttling Tennessee and beating Clemson at Clemson before losing to Notre Dame in their bowl game. Shane Beamer has been overachieving, but should we temper our enthusiasm? They have 4 starters back on defense and lost an all-SEC cornerback in Cam Smith and 2 other starters in the secondary, which seems less than ideal against North Carolina. They can, however, definitely keep up if the good Spencer Rattler we saw at the end of last season is still there. 2 years ago, UNC lost Diami Brown, and then Josh Downs stepped up to be the guy at wide receiver. Now Josh Downs is gone, so who's going to be the guy who steps up to replace him? Tez Walker, a Kent State transfer, is the name to watch there. They don't have a game breaker at running back, but a ton of decent options. 4 starters return on the offensive line, and they add a 3-time All-Sun Belt offensive lineman, Willie Lampkin from Coastal Carolina. So they should be formidable up front. I don't want to talk about the North Carolina defense. We've talked about the North Carolina defense. Is there any reason to expect this to be anything other than a gong show shootout?
Whatever the over is, add 10 to it. Because I think Rattler's going to put up 350 plus yards. And seeing him and Drake May play against potentially some air on defense is going to be really fun. And also, I hope there's a little bit of Beamer ball in there, because you know that North Carolina's defense and secondary, or defense and special teams, probably won't be like that disciplined. And you know, you just say the name Beamer, I'm just going to expect a special teams trick play,
a block punt or something. Yeah.
Something fun. So this game,
that's why they won as many games as they did last year. They were so good on special teams.
Yeah. And I think this is going to be a very fun week 1 on Twitter. There's going to be the amount of just like, this is wild, this is crazy. Kind of like the, was it the App State North Carolina game last year? Obviously not that level of insanity, but I'm expecting just unhinged week 1, people saying this is why they love college football. And that's why I'm tuning into this game, staying away from the spread, but hammering the over on this right now on FanDuel. I think it's like 64.5.
It's cliche, but it's, you know, team who has the ball last probably wins. But I like South Carolina because I feel like you were talking about their Beamer ball. Like, I know they're replacing a lot of pieces on defense, but I think I trust South Carolina more to at least get themselves playing fundamentally better than North Carolina, not necessarily beating themselves as much. And I just think North Carolina's defense is going to do stuff to beat themselves more often than South Carolina is. Drake May's awesome. So is Spencer Rattler. I think there's going to be a ton of points going, but I think South Carolina is going to do a few more little things right and figure out a way to win the game. Also,
there's the rumors that Drake May just didn't like Phil Longo, so it's fun that he's kind of by himself now to see how, not by himself, but
good luck.
Yeah. So we'll see how that goes.
So I did look it up. South Carolina was number 1 in SP Plus special teams rankings last year. North Carolina 42nd, so not terrible. And just because, like, anecdotally in my brain, I remember Mac Brown's teams at Texas usually being pretty solid on special teams for like a bigger program. They were never like the best, but they usually had a pretty reliable special teams unit, except for when they played Michigan in the Rose Bowl. The big game, though, guys, potentially the game of the year in college football, and it comes in week 1. We have number 5 LSU hitting the road to a neutral site to a camping.
I thought you were going to say Texas and Rice.
No, JT Daniels playing his 3rd game against Texas with his 3rd different team. Welcome to the most quintessential transfer portal era fact of all time. Nope. LSU hits the road to Camping World Stadium in Orlando to take on number 8 Florida State. LSU, a 2.5-point favorite. The total 55.5. A potential playoff eliminator in week 1 from the standpoint of the loser of this game has very little room for error. Florida State probably would have to run the table from here. LSU, I think, could, on the very, very off chance they lose one other game that's not to Alabama, but win the rest of their games, beat Alabama, beat Georgia as a 2-loss team, blah, 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 blah. Could happen. Nevertheless, this feels like a game that the loser is now on the thinnest of margins for the playoffs. For me, Florida State, 4th in the country in sack rate last year. LSU quarterbacks sacked on 8.78% of dropbacks last year, 107th worst in the country. Florida State only allowed a 5.33 sack rate. Pretty good because, like, you think Florida State, like the last 5 years, you think of offensive line problems, but that unit has been pretty good. For LSU, Harold Perkins, he had 7.5 sacks last year, but 3 came in one game. He had 13.5 tackles for a loss for the season. Their second best sack artist, BJ Ojolari, is now in the NFL, and this secondary only has one starter back, so they need the front seven, which is talented, but really doesn't have anyone who has proven to be a big-time player other than Harold Perkins to help out a secondary that just needs time to gel. A guy to keep an eye on here is going to be Keon Coleman. Coleman, a Michigan State transfer, had 58 catches, 798 yards, and 7 touchdowns last year. You would expect Florida or LSU is going to try to take Johnny Wilson away. Easier said than done because he is, of course, 6'7" and awesome. But you would figure their best guy is going to be on Johnny Wilson, and the number 2 receiver, which figures to be Keon Coleman, is going to be a key matchup to watch in this game. By the way, Florida State loves tall receivers. Like their outside receivers, they have like 8 guys at the roster who are 6'3" or taller at wide receiver. They just love gigantic wide receivers, creates a matchup problem. So you're looking at a Florida State team that at least anecdotally appears better up front than LSU does. And that's a really, really interesting thing to me in this game because the line play is what's going to matter.
And again, you say Johnny Wilson for me is such a massive key to this game.
It's such a great college football name too. Just Johnny Wilson.
He's 6'7" and has been clocked at running over 21 miles an hour. Like he's such a unicorn.
I could do that.
You're not 6'7", Matt. I know that for a fact.
It's a good point.
But also kind of a LSU is going to be without John Emery as well from a running back standpoint, and the running back room has been pretty
Mason Smith too.
Camp. So I'm really curious to see if this game gets put completely on Jaden Daniels, which, from an offensive standpoint, I think it probably will. So, can Jared Versey get to Jaden Daniels? And that's a matchup that I'm going to be watching a lot during this game. But I'm obviously rolling with my Noles. I'm very high on them. This is such an important game for them. Last year, this matchup was intriguing, but didn't have the national spotlight on it in terms of, hey, this is going to have playoff implications. Brian Kelly's a great coach. He's going to have them ready. This game will be close. And I think Florida State pulls it off late. But yeah, it's just, I'm really curious how LSU is going to be down a few men. That's a couple big losses across. I know I'm blanking on the name. I think one of their defensive
Mason Smith, defensive tackle, yeah.
Yeah, so he's out as well. And again, those are huge things early in the season, especially with a mobile quarterback who is going to break contain, right? And so again, it's going to be really great matchups of 2 of the best defensive ends in college football going against 2 of the most athletic quarterbacks in college football. So this is going to be a fun one to watch. And I love that it's on Sunday night. I love the Labor Day Sunday night game. It is truly beautiful.
There's a lot of expectations on both teams, but I feel like the expectations on LSU are so incredibly heavy this year, especially Jaden Daniels too, with a backup quarterback situation like where we talked about in the SEC preview. Like some people think he's actually the more talented quarterback, and Jaden Daniels showed flashes of being really good last year, but he also had some awful games. Like I keep coming back to the Tennessee game, and I just can't get that one out of my head. I know Tennessee was good, but Tennessee went in there and just absolutely murdered LSU at LSU. They got a lot to overcome in this one. And I slowly find myself going from, I think LSU figures out a way to win to, I think Florida State figures out a way to win, because I think they're more of a complete product right now. They have basically their whole roster with them. LSU's got some people out, some suspensions. How are they going to get after the quarterback? Who's going to get after the quarterback better? I think I just trust Florida State a little bit more in this spot. I think I trust their quarterback play a little bit more. It's weird to say given where the program's been over the last few years, but I think Florida State's going to put forth a more consistent effort.
Yeah, so Jaden Daniels, can't forget last year clashed with his receivers at times because they wanted him to be more patient and not run as much. Not because they felt like they were getting open and they just felt like he didn't have the trust in them, and they wanted him to be more patient, and that's going to be a key. But he was running for his life a lot last year, and Florida State's pass rush is going to be very, very good. So will he stand in there? Will he take the hits? Will he deliver the ball to a pretty good receiving core that he has? The one thing is that Florida State does have as much returning talent as just about anybody in the country, but overall roster talent, LSU has more according to the 24/7 talent composite, and it's not particularly close, which was surprising to me. Florida State's roster not quite as talented in terms of the just the raw recruiting talent that they have on the roster, but they've done a really good job in developing that. And we talked about it in the SEC preview, but if you missed it, Brian Kelly's talked about how they want to move Harold Perkins around. He's been training at inside linebacker some because, again, they're not going to have Mason Smith. The defensive line and linebacking talent wasn't great at getting after the quarterback last year. They've improved the linebacking core with some transfers too, but Harold Perkins is a guy who they're going to game plan to stop. Florida State is going to do that. So maybe it's just them trying to move him around to give him some opportunities and maybe just give Florida State something to think about. So that way that might open up some other opportunities for other guys to really impact this game, because they are going to have to get Jordan Travis on the ground. They're going to have to make him uncomfortable. And the quarterback who is more uncomfortable is going to be at the disadvantage. And it would seem like LSU is going to be at a disadvantage given what they have coming back, but I would not discount the talent. I want no piece of this game. I'm not going to bet this game. I'm going to sit at home. I'm going to go to the Haddam Neck Fair. I'm going to eat fried foods. I'm going to take my nephew on some rides, and then I'm going to come home and I'm going to buckle in and I'm going to watch this game in food coma out. I want no part of betting this game.
I think
anything can happen.
My take on this one too, because I'm with you. I think it's going to be very close. I think it's whoever wins the turnover battle is going to come out on top on this one.
For sure. I have notes on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more games and a new device to do. So I've got a bunch to talk about. I will open up the floor to you guys. If you guys bring up any of the games that I bring up that I have notes on, I will give my notes as well. Phil, what are you looking for? What other games, what other things are you interested in on Saturday?
It's not on Saturday, actually, on
or tonight.
Monday.
Oh, Monday.
Monday, okay.
I'm really interested in Clemson Duke. Because
that should be a fun game.
It should be a fun game. Two things. I am curious how Garrett Riley looks in that offense, because I think that'll be a pretty big determining factor, right? I think people are assuming he's going to be great. But you just don't know. And so I'm really curious what Clemson will look like. And will Clemson feel like a new look Clemson? Will the quarterback be as hyped as he has been? He played great in the bowl game last year, played terrible in other spots, but he was a true freshman thrown into bad situations. Is Duke getting overhyped as a perennial, like, they're dangerous this year, they're dangerous this year, they're dangerous this year? Or are they going to be a 7-win team who hangs around in one game throughout the year? Riley Leonard's a good quarterback. Mike Elko is a great defensive coach. So in terms of a matchup that I'm excited about, it's Garrett Riley versus Mike Elko and his defense. Like, I think that'll be a very fun matchup. And also to see if Clemson can live up to some of the hype. I think still early on, they're going to lean really heavily on the run game and Will Shipley, because he's just a great back. He's really fun to watch. But also Riley Leonard, what Riley Leonard shows up and what Duke offense shows up against this Clemson defense. Like, I can see Duke shitting the bed completely on offense. And you just don't know. And so it's really interesting because people are preemptively saying Clemson is definitely a playoff caliber team. And until I see their offense flow, until I see what their defense looks like against the run after some really poor performances last year in spots, is Clemson going to be back? And I think this game, my gut and my heart of heart says I think Duke's overrated, and I think Clemson just rolls over them. And then people are like, oh, Clemson is Clemson again, and Duke.
Clemson back.
Yeah, exactly. And that could be an overreaction from this game, but it's just one that, especially it's on a Monday night. So again, when you get hopefully great football game on a Monday night with a lot of storylines, that's the one that I'm looking at. Outside of that, just new quarterbacks and new systems and turning on a game being like, wait, this guy's here? Isn't he 37? Like, how is this guy still playing? So a lot of that with, I mentioned Quinn Ewers versus JT Daniels, just he's still playing, which is great. You have Tanner Mordecai, you have Phil Dracovic, you have all these different guys who are in different situations. And for me, that's one of the things that I love about the transfer portal. Don't love the transfer portal in general, but I love seeing quarterbacks who you've been watching for the past 7 years on random teams and having week 0 and week 1, giving yourself time to like reorient.
Oh yeah, he's there. Yeah, that's right. Jeff Sims is with Nebraska now. That's right.
Is there a quarterback that I could say that would like surprise you that guy's like just somehow like still playing? Like, Kenny Trill is actually still playing. Something like that where it's someone random. I was just thinking about that the other day.
When JT Daniels is starting for his 7th college in 5 years, I'm going to be kind of surprised. Like, oh, he's still around? Because he's going to find a way to keep being around.
Go look at the 2017 college football recruiting class and look at the names of guys who are in the NFL now and the list of quarterbacks that are still playing college football. from that recruiting class. Because like Tua
Hell yeah.
Tagovailoa is in like year 4 in the NFL, and there's still a bunch of guys, like a bunch. Matt, before we move on to what you're looking for, what other games you're looking at, just some news that broke right when we came a little after we came on the air today. Not really surprising. Jalen Milroe will start at quarterback for Alabama in Saturday's opener against Middle Tennessee State. Sources tell Chris Lowe at ESPN. Milroe has taken most of the first-team reps this preseason. So I'm just kind of reading the tea leaves. It kind of felt like that's which way they were going, and that's not going to
felt like that was trending the last couple of weeks.
And that's not going to matter till next week when I will launch into the complicated history between Jalen Milroe and Quinn Ewers next week if he maintains that starting quarterback job. Matt, what other games are you looking at this week as we roll on to week 1 of the season?
USC plays Nevada, and obviously that's not like they're going to win that football game. They're going to score a bunch of points, but like they play Nevada, and Oregon State goes to San Jose State, who USC played last week. It's an interesting spot, I should say, for Oregon State, because San Jose State put up 28 points at USC and made USC's defense again like bring up a lot of questions. If Oregon State can go out and like kind of bully them, I know it's a team they should beat, but go on the road, bully San Jose State, hold them to 10 points, kind of like flex their muscles over what USC wasn't able to do. I think that's a nice confidence booster for them. And in terms of USC, like, can their defense stop anybody? Nevada's a very bad football team. They're going to be a very bad football team. But if USC goes out and wins 56-28 again, there's still more questions about that defense than we have answers. So I think those are two very intriguing spots for me. Dan, I think you have Illinois, Toledo on that list. I'm intrigued by that one too, because Toledo brings back a lot of talent, and Illinois obviously has a lot of moving parts. But I'll let you kind of get more into that one. But yeah, that Pac-12 spot is interesting for me for both of those teams.
Do you know what the worst game of the weekend is?
What?
East Carolina, Michigan.
No, on Sunday at 11 a.m. in New Jersey, you have Northwestern.
Rutgers, Northwestern.
Ugh. That
I'm gonna watch the shit out of it. I'm gonna watch the shit out of it.
I would watch it if I was home. I'm not going to be home. My wife would be like, "What are you watching?" I'd be like, "Don't worry about it."
Football.
As far as Toledo, Illinois was on my list, I have a bunch of games. I'm just going to rattle off all my notes. Toledo and Illinois, Matt brought up. Like you said, Toledo. They bring back, so they have DeQuan Finn. They bring back a really productive running back room and their top 2 wide receivers. Their offensive line wasn't great, but they have continuity with four starters back and added some Power 5 transfers for depth. They're considered the best team in the MAC with margin. So it's a fun test for Illinois. I think a lot of my games are kind of like interesting tests for teams that I'm intrigued by this year. And that's one of them. You talked about what Illinois lost. Another game that I'm interested in as far as like a good team facing another pretty good team flying under the radar, South Alabama at Tulane. South Alabama lost 2 regular season games by 5 total points last year. They returned 9 starters on each side of the ball. More importantly, though, guys, this game is all about Mardi Gras shit talking. South Alabama's in Mobile. They are wearing Home of Mardi Gras decals on their helmets because Mardi Gras was first celebrated in the city of Mobile. But I hate to break it to them. Them wearing a Home of Mardi Gras decals against a team from New Orleans is like Rutgers wearing a birthplace of college football decal against Michigan or Ohio State. You might have created it, but other people do it a bit better. West Virginia at Penn State. I just like a good Power 5.
That is such a college football storyline. I love that. That's so college football. Sorry,
awesome.
Didn't mean to cut you off, but
I'm just rolling. West Virginia, Penn State. I just want to see Penn State handle business. I just want to see Allard look good. I want to see the running game look good. West Virginia stinks, but I'm just kind of
West Virginia is always going to be a team that preseason I just trick myself into thinking is solid, even though they're just not anymore. They're not a good program anymore. But for some reason, my dumb brain every year just thinks of Pat White and Steve Slate. They're like, oh, they can score some points. They can be pretty solid this year. And it's like, nope, they're really bad. They're going to be 3-9.
Another game featuring a team we talked about several times last year on this show. We're not talking about dogs with them, but Old Dominion at Virginia Tech. Old Dominion beat Virginia Tech last year. I don't think they're going to win. However, a couple years ago, Fordham hired Kevin Decker to run their offense, and he installed Josh Heupel's offense, and that turned Tim DeMorad into one of the most prolific FCS quarterbacks ever. Fordham last year averaged 600 yards per game on offense, and that this offseason, Old Dominion hired Decker to bring that same offense to Norfolk, and we saw an immediate regression without Decker and DeMorad in Fordham's season opener. Grant Wilson comes with Decker from Fordham, so he knows the offense, but didn't play many snaps. Again, I don't expect them immediately against Virginia Tech to just look like Tennessee, but I think this is more of a long-term thing I'm watching, and I wonder if the 35-year-old Decker is about to be the next Zach Kitley like the offensive coordinator who ascends to a high level very quickly. You talked about quarterbacks and new quarterbacks. Coastal Carolina at UCLA. Ethan Garber starts. All 3 quarterbacks will play. One more year of Grayson McCall, which is not a bad thing. A guy I think we've all enjoyed watching play. But I hope for Coastal's sake, Tim Beck is a better head coach than he was an offensive coordinator. And the last game, guys, which is going to lead into a new segment on this show, Colgate and Syracuse. First game in this rivalry was played in 1891. The all-time series is 31-31-5, but Syracuse has won 16 straight, so Syracuse will presumably take its first ever series lead over their bitter rivals with a win on Saturday, which leads to a new segment called Dan's History Lesson of the Week. So, hold on, I got to check something real quick. Okay, I see Phil. So, Dan's History Lesson of the Week. Bitter rivals, you say? Well, maybe not in the year 2023, but in the year 1934, this rivalry went ham, as the kids would say. The rivalry between the schools, just 38 miles apart from each other, was so heated, a sports writer once said it was more intense than the Chaco War, which was fought between Bolivia and Paraguay from 1932 to 1935 and had 100,000 casualties. Syracuse was unbeaten coming off of wins against Penn State and Michigan State and had dreams of playing in the Rose Bowl. The dreams of Syracuse's, quote, brilliant galaxy of husky young pigskin plowboys, end quote, were dashed by Colgate in a 13-2 loss. Colgate fans, and this is why I'm doing this, Colgate fans were in such a frenzy, they rushed the field at Syracuse to try and tear down the goalposts. It resulted in a violent clash with Syracuse ROTC, who was armed with riot clubs, and eventually 7 people ended up in the hospital. However, for Syracuse, a tactical mistake was made. ROTC members guarding the west goalposts saw the battle going on the other side of the field and wanted to get in on the action, leaving the west goalpost unattended to. Fordham fans then tore down the west goalposts, sawed it into pieces, and sold pieces to Fordham supporters at the Hotel Syracuse. Syracuse and Fordham in 1934 was lit.
Yes, that sounds absolutely insane.
I just went down this rabbit hole when I saw something from one of the FCS reporters I follow on Twitter talking about how it was 31-31-5. I was like, I need to know more about this rivalry. Was Colgate good at one point?
Here we go, Colgate.
Just an awesome.
I'm taking Colgate.
I love it. All right.
What would be the funniest loss this week? I don't know why I was just thinking of that, but who losing would be the funniest? Because I think I got one. It's not going to happen, but if New Mexico beat Texas A&M after another year of like, we got our Connor Wegman, he's the quarterback, we got this. I don't know why I thought of that, but I was scrolling through the schedule, and if somehow A&M enters this year with expectations and loses at home to New Mexico, that would be one of the funniest outcomes, I think, of week 1.
I mean, like, you can go down any number of the list of these ranked versus ranked games. Rice beating Texas, Tennessee State beating Notre Dame.
Okay, that's not going to happen.
Middle Tennessee beating Alabama. Like, any of these would be kind of hysterical.
Yeah, I don't know why that just popped in my head. I just imagined Texas A&M losing at home, and it made me laugh.
I would drink Jimbo tears.
Well, we are, I guess, to some degree, a betting show.
Technically,
I only have 3 bets. I'm trying to take it easy this week. Phil, how many you got? Matt, how many you got?
Small card for me. Kept it small. Go ahead, Phil.
Small card, but I picked 3 ones that are like I'm going very consequent, like very big games in my picks, which again is always a great strategy for week 1, right? So I'm picking. I'm doing Clemson minus 12.5, Florida State plus 2.5, and TCU minus 20.5.
Okay.
It took me I usually add to my card as Phil and Dan read picks. It took me everything in my power to not add Clemson minus 12.5 and keep it off. I'm going to be disciplined here. Discipline, Matt. Penn State minus 20.5. I think they roll West Virginia at home. Taking South Carolina plus 2.5. I like Miami minus 16.5 against Miami, Ohio at home. If it gets up to 17, I'm not touching it, but I like that number for them. Iowa minus 25.5. You got Kirk Ferentz hyping up a Utah State punter. I think they might win that game like 28-0. And Tennessee team total over 41.5 against Virginia. Virginia's defense is just decimated. And I think this is a run it up type of game for Tennessee on offense.
So I have 3 games on my card. First and foremost, the best game of the week, UTSA at Houston. Over 60.
Those uniforms.
The Houston uniforms are awesome.
Oh, adding South Carolina, North Carolina over 64.5. Matt, can you add that too?
Gotcha. It's that. Yeah, I'll put that on my card. I like it.
So both teams lose high-profile wide receiver Zachary Franklin from UTSA, Tank Dell from Houston. I don't care. Do you guys know? I don't know if this was common knowledge. Frank Harris almost retired this offseason after an infection in his knee left him in just like he couldn't walk. But a doctor was like, "Give me one shot. I'm pretty sure I can fix this." They were able to fix it. He's ready to go. Donovan Smith is the quarterback at Houston. Comes from Texas Tech. A very high ceiling, very low floor kind of quarterback. I just expect fireworks, 37-35 overtime thriller last year. And then they might be my team this year. The UMass Minutemen team total over 7.5 points plus 112 against Auburn in the Hugh Freeze debut. Mad disrespect to have my Minutemen team total over be plus money. Did nobody watch Tyson Pumachan last week? I'm upset about that. And then the last one, this requires some setup. Last week, the only bet I played in college football was a first touchdown scorer parlay. That was 100% profit boost on FanDuel. I bet Audric Estime and Patrick Smith from Vanderbilt, first touchdown parlay. It hit at 54-1. So I am definitely Icarus flying too close to the sun this week. FanDuel gave me a 50% profit boost for this. So I'm going to go with Brew McCoy at plus 700 for Tennessee against Virginia, Blake Corum for Michigan against East Carolina at plus 265, and then Marvin Harrison Jr. at plus 437 for Ohio State. It comes out to roughly 1,500 to a little more than 1,500 to 1 on this. A very, very small bet to win about $560. But Brew McCoy, Blake Corum, Marvin Harrison, first touchdown scorer parlay. Like I said, Icarus, I am flying too close to the sun. Oh, Phil, your microphone died again. Oop, I think Phil's internet might be completely dead. He is frozen.
Yeah, he's frozen. I think that's a good time. Good place. I think that's a good place for us to wrap it forward.
Yeah. Phil, we lost him.
Oh, we lost him.
Well,
it's a sign.
Yeah. Well, that was fun. I thought we were going to go longer than an hour, and we kept it under an hour, so I appreciate that. And everyone's in. Good job, everybody. That was a lot of fun. We just cannot wait to sit noon till 2 a.m. tomorrow watching football. Going to be great. Cannot wait to do it. Glad to be back talking ball with you guys. Glad to watch some college football. Glad just to enjoy the weekend.
Hope everyone
out there. Hope everyone enjoys the weekend. More importantly, we hope your bets are profitable. For Phil
just messaged us saying he had a power surge in his house. Phil's internet is just a weekly story, and it's never it seems like it's something like that too.
He's moving soon, so maybe he'll move to a place with better internet. Who knows? We'll see what's going to happen. But for Florida Phil, for Matt, I'm Dan. We appreciate you guys tuning in, and we will be back sometime next week to break down everything that happened and then preview week 2 as well. But until then, enjoy the football, and we will talk to you soon.